Good morning, guys. Thank you very much for being with us. It's James here from the support desk. Again, it's great to have Gavin with us doing number 6 of the second series, the last one of this series of Fix a Photo. We've had lots of messages coming in. Morning, Steve. Morning. Morning. Lots of people saying good morning. Steve in the Netherlands. Hi. Great to have you with us. And today we're going to be doing the last of Fix a Photo. If you have pictures, you can still send them in. I will store them for another series, so you're welcome to still send them in to fixaphoto@theimagefile.com. I did receive some very late yesterday, which I will put in that pile, guys. So thank you very much. Gavin, over to you.
Thank you very much, James. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Wow, international audience. That's quite exciting, isn't it? So thank you for joining me wherever you are in the world. Yeah, so I'd like to thank the Image File for allowing me to do this. This is number 6. Wow, the last 12 weeks have whizzed by. So Series 2, Episode 6 of Fix a Photo, and we've got some great photos to finish off with. As always, I need to thank everybody that sent them in. That really makes this talk possible, and the Image File for putting it on. Okay, so let's close this down and get cracking. As always, this is a live talk, which means literally anything can happen in the next 30 minutes or so, and if you've seen these before, you know it probably will. Something is always bound to go wrong. That's part of the live thing, and part of the live thing as well is you can actually ask questions. Do pop them in the over to James, and he's there collating the questions. Unless, of course, you're watching the recording, in which case you can't ask the questions because it's the recording. But hopefully you're joining me live. Okay, so first image, first little bit of information. As always, I don't know who sent these in, so this is anonymous. But the question reads, I have a beautiful photo of the Milky Way, but the lights are distracting. I've tried to remove them, but to no avail. Any help would be appreciated. Okay, so first of all, let me say this is one of my bucket list type photos. There's a few things as a photographer I would love to do one day, and going and shooting the Milky Way, something like this would just be fantastic. A couple of reasons I haven't done it. Normally in the northern hemisphere, when we get the sky dark enough, it's blooming freezing cold, and I'm more of a warm weather person, and I'm told it's actually better, you get a better Milky Way in the southern hemisphere. Never been there, so I think that's one of the things on my bucket list. I will eventually get to do this, but this is just a great shot to kick off with, and there are a few things I can do to improve it. So the lights, I'm guessing the photographer is talking about the lights down in the bottom here, which yeah, I mean, they are quite bright, they are quite colourful. They're the most colourful and the most brightest part of the picture, so it is a little bit distracting, and I'm sure there is something we can do. But before we get to that, it's a good idea just to do a little bit of work, a little bit of preparation, and a bit of improving on the picture before you spend the time fixing these. Because if you find you fix these and you don't find the picture improves, then you've possibly wasted your time that way round. So it's better to improve things first. Now, I go through a series of questions that I ask myself on any raw file. The first question is, does the picture need cropping? I think in this case it possibly does a bit, but I'm not going to. I'm thinking about the weird converging verticals here, but we're going to talk about that in the next image, so I'm going to leave that for this one and cover that in the next shot. Everything else on the crop I'm happy with. The colors. Now, colors on this picture are very, very difficult to work out. I think if I just reduce the color temperature, I'd get a color that I would be a little happier with. And this is one of the beauties of shooting this sort of shot, or any shot in RAW, is you can tweak the colors to your personal taste and maybe get them a little bit more accurate, or if not accurate, a little bit more interesting. So I think that's what we've got there. Okay, so next thing to do is just to fix the general image itself. There's an auto button. Always try auto. You've got nothing to lose. In this case, I don't think it helps, so I'll just hit the default button. And I'm going to apply my own little adjustments here. I think really all I want to do is come down to the clarity and add a bit of clarity, because that really works well on this type of picture, just to bring up the stars, and put a little bit of vibrance, saturation. Maybe open up the shadows a tiny little bit. But other than that, I'm kind of happy with the shot as it stands. Now this shot, there's not much data here with it, but I can see this is shot at 5000 ISO on a Canon 6D. So that's kind of up at the upper end of its scale, and if we have a little look at the image up close, I will find a little bit of noise in there, and that's kind of to be expected. I mean, you're on a 30-second exposure. You couldn't do much more with the gear you've got there, but we can just come and reduce the noise reduction in here using the luminance noise reduction. It's difficult to do this too much because you will start to lose some of the smaller stars, and you can see the stars. They're the ones that are actually slightly elongated, because even on a 30-second exposure the stars rotate, so you've got that slight elongation on a few of those stars. But that's a good shot. Okay, so that's really my processing done. Let's open up the image into Photoshop and see what we can do about correcting the obvious problem that the photographer was worried about, which are the bright lights. The one on the extreme left, I'm not too worried about that one. It's more these that are bugging me, these three here. Now, the photographer said they've tried and it hasn't really worked for them. And trust me, I had a lot of goes at this, and I can see exactly the problem you had. First, I looked at this and thought, well, this is easy. No problem, we can get rid of these. It's not quite as simple as it first looked. So let's start off by doing the correct steps of making a new layer. Because whenever you're going to start cloning and copying, you probably want to make a brand new layer. New and layer, there we go. And work on that, and that just gives you a little get-out-of-jail-free card if it all goes horribly wrong. And because this is live, it probably will. No, let's think positive. This is live, it'll definitely work. This is the last one for the image file. Nothing can possibly go wrong. Yeah. So I'm just going to get myself my go-to tool. That's the spot healing brush. This is my favorite cloning tool, and the reason it's my favorite cloning tool is because it's kind of an idiot-proof tool. There's nothing you need to change. You just choose an appropriate brush size, and you just start painting. And as I paint, you can start to see my problem, which is the light spills way beyond the edges. There's a sort of a green halo going around the outside. And the further you paint with this tool, the more messy it becomes. We can try and remove it, and we really can. And it's not brilliant. Now, it's worth noting I've got sample all layers ticked up here, otherwise this wouldn't work on my blank layer. And you can see it's just painting on a blank layer, so I can toggle it on and off. But, oh dear, that isn't good. So, to get things better, sometimes the best tool isn't the easy tool. Sometimes the best tool is the slightly more harder tool, something like the clone stamp tool. So let's use that. With the clone stamp tool, it's a two-step process. First of all, you have to hold the Alt key and sample from an area you wish to copy. So, for example, over here on the ground. Then you choose a brush size and you just paint, and hopefully you paint that in fairly well. And we come across here and we just sort of follow the horizon line and we paint in a little bit like that. And we can just sample from a few areas here and there and just tidy this up a little bit. So a combination of the two tools is where we want to be. Now that's fine. It's not too bad. It's not perfect. Now, if we wanted to get this perfect, we would need probably a 2-hour webinar, and as much as the image file do love listening to my voice, I think that might be pushing my luck. So for the purposes of this demonstration, that's pretty close. That will do. Let's move along to the other side. Let's go grab the same tool. I'll start with my spot healing brush, cross my fingers. You never know. Maybe this time it'll work. Okay, now that is actually the worst this has done. I've done this a few times. It's not been that bad. That's quite something. Let's give that another go. Yeah, it's determined, isn't it? Okay, so not so keen on that one. I'm going to get the clone tool, and we'll just clone over the top of that. And again, you could do this better with a bit of time. Weirdly, when I tried this earlier, the clone tool was okay, but the spot healing brush was the go-to tool. But there you go. Did I mention this is live? Okay, so we've covered that one up. What about the tree here? Now, this is actually the one that really stumped me. Yeah, that's a good of the joke scare. I'm sorry. It really was quite hard to get this one because you've got half a tree in here. So if I try and use the spot healing brush to remove it, yeah, it'll try and remove the entire tree because it doesn't know what is something I want to keep and what is something I want to lose. So I'm going to use the clone stamp tool, but what I want to do is I want to take a part of this tree, this sort of bush next to the house, and put it across. But if you see, it would work on the left side, but not on the right side. Well, there's a little hidden feature on the clone stamp tool that allows me to mirror the brush. Now, it's easier to show you than explain. It's hidden up here on the options bar. So it's the thing that looks like a folder with a clone stamp icon in the middle. If I click on that, it brings up the clone source panel. And there's all sorts of weird things you can change. For example, you can invert the brush. I've no idea why you would want to do that. Answers on a postcard to the image file on that one, but no, please don't do that. If you do, then you can use an inverted brush, but the one I want to do is this one here that flips the brush horizontally, or of course you can also flip it vertically as well. Okay, and what that allows me to do is if I sample from the side is I get a horizontal copy. Okay, so it's sort of flipped over, and now I can just come in here and we'll just paint a bit of extra tree in here like so. Something like that. There we go. And then all I need to do is unflip it. We'll grab another sample from roughly the same point, and we'll just paint that in too. Okay, so again, I could spend a little bit more time getting this really good, and I can come in with the clone stamp tool or the spot healing brush and maybe just kind of grow a few extra branches in there just to make it a little bit different each side. And a few clicks will give me a little bit of randomness in there. And again, the more time you spend on this, the better it's going to look. Oh, that looks okay. But that should just cover up that little bit of light. And there we go. We've kind of hidden the lights. As always in these sorts of pictures, time will give you rewards that we just don't have on this webinar. But hopefully that gives you a pretty good start. The only thing I'm going to suggest as one last little tip is if you get the chance to go back and redo this shot, grab yourself a torch as you're heading out the door, because I'm just going to jump into Camera Raw and show you what we could do in Camera Raw, but we could do better with a proper exposure. And that's just light it with your torch just for a few seconds, and we'll just put a bit of extra light in here, and we could just light up that building like that and just put a little bit of extra daylight or torch light in there just to separate that out from the background. It wouldn't fix your lighting problem over on the left-hand side, but it just gives it an even better lift, and I think that's a great shot. I so want to go and do that. Okay, so that's that one covered. Hopefully that helps the photographer. Let's go do something similar, but in a completely different place. So we have another picture, and picture came with comments. The comments said, could you remove the crane? Yes, I could. I've tried to use the patch tool, but I get artifacts when I'm doing it. Plus, can you give me any other improvements you might want to suggest? Oh, you see, you should never ask me that. Anything I can suggest? Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great. So yeah, we can remove the crane. That's actually not too difficult with the right tool for the job. Any other improvements I can suggest? I could say I'd suggest going the other side of this great big egg thing and taking the same shot, but I'm not because it's there in the picture. So that's fine. We'll work with it, and I reckon we can actually get some use out of that in a moment. But let's start with my standard steps. My standard steps are the crop tool. So let's begin with the crop tool. Do I want to crop this picture? Yes and no. I think I do, but what I really want to do is straighten up the bridge. So we've got Tower Bridge here in London, and Tower Bridge is falling down. It's at least how it's looking, isn't it? It's leaning to the side. Weirdly, on the other side, it's leaning in slightly as well. So we have a slight converging verticals with a reasonably wide-angle lens looking at the information here. So I'm not going to use the crop tool to fix that. I'm going to use another part of Camera Raw, or of course Lightroom. If you're a Lightroom user, it's the same thing in Lightroom, and it's the lens correction facility. Now this is a reasonably new part of Camera Raw. I think you have to have Photoshop CS6 or Lightroom 4 to access this bit, or probably even Lightroom 5 and CC. I can't remember exactly when these came in, but it's not a problem. If you have an older version, this would be something I would do in Photoshop, but now I can actually do it here in Raw, and I can do it at the beginning of my process, which is where I want to do it. So there are a bunch of little buttons at the top on the manual lens correction. Let's just start here with this one, which applies horizontal corrections. Okay, so if you've got a wonky horizon, then it'll straighten that up. In this case, it's straightened up the lines here just to give me a kind of a straight-looking line. And that is definitely better, but it hasn't permanently fixed the problem. So let's undo that. Let's try the next one, and this will apply a vertical correction. Okay, and that gets us a lot better. You can see London Bridge, or Tower Bridge, is now vertical. That's good, and it's pretty much vertical here as well, and that feels about right. Maybe not perfect, but about right. There's one more to try, and it's the one here that does both the horizontals and the verticals. And I warn you now, it does do some pretty wacky things. So that has perfect verticals and perfect horizontals at the expense of everything else. I mean, that is, yeah, okay, ticks the technically correct-ish box, but not really what we're after photographically. The one I tend to use most of the time is this one, the big A, which stands for auto, and that gives you a happy balance between all of the others, and I find that more often that's the button that just gives me the feeling of this being roughly right, never perfect, never wrong. So that's the one I use a lot of the time. I'll just click on the A button and correct my horizontals and verticals. Okay, with that done, we can now go back to the crop tool, because I don't need this little slither of light here, and there's a few little bits on the right hand side that are just annoying as well now, so let's remove those using the crop tool like that, and I reckon we can lose a little bit of this path along the bottom. I think we're probably something like that. Okay, so that's pretty good, happy with that. So I've corrected the converging verticals, I've sorted out the cropping. Now it's really everything else. The white balance, I can change my white balance to, I reckon it's shade. Let's go with shade, and maybe we could bring back the highlights and pump up the colors a little bit, something like that. But I actually think this is a black and white picture. This screams black and white to me. So there's a couple of ways you could go black and white. One way is just to take away the saturation, punch up the contrast. The way I like to go black and white in RAW is to jump over to the HSL stroke grayscale and click on the convert to grayscale. This is the best way to go black and white because you get the most amount of control. And the way I use it is I'll just get the reds and say, well, okay, if I move the red slider, what's changing? It's just the faces of the people that's changing. Must have been a cold day, they've all gone red, so we'll make their faces nice and bright. Let's get the orange slider. Okay, there's quite a bit of orange in this picture, so we'll reduce the oranges down to a darker tone. Are there any yellows? Yep, there's a bit of yellows, so we'll have a lighter yellow. Green, there's a hint of green in here. Aquas, yeah, a little bit, but not much. Blues, okay, that's the big one, of course. That's going to be the sky, so we can put some darker blues in there. Any purples? No. Any magentas? No. So I can just come and change my settings in here to give me a good tonal range. And that then means I can just come and add some contrast and obviously some clarity. I nearly forgot clarity. And that works pretty well. Okay, what about this big black blob in the foreground? Well, I'm just going to grab myself the adjustment brush and we'll just add a little bit more brightness in there just so we can see what's going on. A little bit too much around the edges there. Okay, just so we can see something's in there so it's not a complete sort of shadowless blob, and we'll add some detail into that part of the shot. Okay, did we spill in there? No, we're fine. Okay, and I could spend ages working on this shot, but time's not on my side. But I think if I just go back to a before and after, I think that's, for me, improve the shot. We could probably darken the sky down as well, but for now, that's fine. Okay, let's open up that image and do the thing that the photographer actually asked me to do, which is remove the crane. Okay, let's clear a bit of room. And once again, I'm going to make a brand new layer because it's always better to do these on new layers just to give yourself that little extra degree of control. And to remove this, well, again, I would go with my go-to tool. Rather than using the patch tool in this one, I would just use my spot healing tool and draw over this and cross my fingers, and yay, look at that, it works. And if it works, brilliant. If it doesn't work, then I'd try another tool. But in this case, I'm kind of happy with that. That thing's going to stay there. And if it doesn't work, my go-to tool number 2 is generally the clone stamp tool for little fine detail-y bits like that where you want to remove things. Okay, so can't remember what was crane now and what was actually part of the building. I hope that's not structurally important to the building, but there you go. Okay, so there we are. Hopefully that answers the photographer's question on that one. Okay, so let's close that down. Do something completely different. So question number 3, and this was actually a question rather than an image sent in. So a question said, I've got dust spots on my photos. is there a quick way of removing them from lots of similar pictures? Yeah, we seem to have had a collection of cloning and removing questions and photos this week, but that's fine. They're all slightly different scenarios, which is really good. Now, I didn't get any pictures sent in, so I'm going to use some of mine. I've got a batch of images here, which are very similar. They may look the same as I open them up, but they are very similar. This is actually from a time-lapse sequence. So this is 6 pictures from 300, and you can probably see there may be the odd dust spot or 2 on this particular picture. They are very similar. As I flick through them, you'll see they are all different, though. This is 1 picture every 3 seconds, so it's a little sequence. And if I go back to the beginning, if you have a look at the dust spots, you can see them particularly around the sun. As I go from one end to the other, you can see the image is rotating because I've got my camera on a mechanical turning platform, but the dust spots stay in the same place. And that's the thing about dust spots. They don't move around your picture. They stay on your sensor in the same position. And that means you can remove them from multiple pictures, and sometimes it will work fine. Other times you may have to do them 1 picture at a time. But let's say, for example, you were doing a wedding shot and you have a sequence of images, maybe group shots, and you've got some dust spots on your image. That's a perfect scenario that kind of mirrors what I'm doing here. Okay, so first of all, I need to do some general changes to the picture. No point removing dust spots if you don't see them once you've changed a few settings. So I reckon there's a nicer bluish color to come out of this, and obviously a little bit of clarity, but this time I'm actually going to take the clarity down. Can you see what happens to the dust spots when I reduce the clarity? Hopefully that comes over on the video. They become a little less obvious. So I'm going to do that, and we'll just pull up the colors and pull back the highlights and open up the shadows, and all the kind of usual things I'm going to do to a picture I will do before I remove the dust spots, once again to make sure it's worth spending the time on fixing the dust spots. Okay, once that's done, now I can start to go to town with the spot removal tool. And the spot removal tool will do exactly what it says. You just click away on the spots using a brush that's slightly bigger than the spots you're trying to remove, because it's a feathered brush, so it doesn't work just around the center, it feathers out. And I'm going to go and do these. Now, that looks like most of them to me, and you may not see many of them on the video, but there's a little button here that says, down the bottom, down here, Visualize Spots. Turn that on, and that brings up a slider that allows me to visualize the spots, and then I can go and see a few that maybe I wasn't seeing from the zoomed out view. Okay, so I can go and, actually there's loads in here, isn't there? You tend to get dust spots when, or you tend to see them when you're shooting with a small aperture, f/29, and a wide angle lens, f/16, on a evenly toned background, i.e. the sky. So that's when you see them the most. Okay, I reckon that's pretty good. Try and avoid things like this. This looks like it might be a streak of dust. It's actually a plain trail going across, and as part of the time lapse, that's important. Right, so that's my dust spots removed. Okay, they're no longer there. I've done it to 1 picture. I might have to do it to loads, where there's 300 in this scene, so 299 more to go. Well, fortunately, this is where Photoshop and Lightroom come in really helpful, because I've opened multiple images in RAW, so I click on Select All. There is a Synchronize button here, and the Synchronize button allows me to copy what I've done to all of the other pictures I have open and selected. Okay, so Lightroom users have a similar button that will allow you to synchronize, and it's a nice, great big button. It's slightly different in Photoshop, but the effect is the same. Now, if I just synchronize what I've done here, I'll synchronize all of the colors and the other settings. If I go to another picture, the dust spots are still there. Okay, so if you want to get rid of the dust spots, you have to select them all, Synchronize button, and turn on the spot removal, which is turned off by default. Okay, so if you need to synchronize cropping, it's the same. If you need to synchronize local adjustments, that's the adjustment brush, and the graduated filter, that needs turning on too. But in this case, just spot removal. And that will synchronize the spot removal on all of the images. Now it's worth just flicking through the other images just to make sure that that cloning doesn't do anything weird. So you do have to watch out, particularly if you have things that move across the area that you're cloning into. You might suddenly find you end up with a clone that isn't right on one picture and you need to manually do it. And also watch out for stuff like this. So you might think this is a brand new dust spot, but if I go in closer, it's actually a bird flying over. So do watch out for a few little oddities like that. But there we go. Hopefully that helps the photographer. Yes, you can remove multiple dust spots. The best place to do it is either in Lightroom or in Adobe Camera Raw. Right, we have one more to do, and fortunately it's a nice quick one because we're running out of time rapidly. And the question says, let's just open an image, here we go. Question says, and it was again another question rather than the photograph, because it says, I've just upgraded to Photoshop CC 2014, well done, and I found a new thing called Focus Area. What does it do? Okay, now, yeah, every time a new version of Photoshop or Lightroom or any software that you use comes out, you assume there's going to be some new things, and of course there are. I find the best way to find out what new things do is to use them. Just try it. Just see what happens. There's probably tutorials online as well, but sometimes you can't beat having a go. However, this one is a little bit of an odd one. So let's go to Select, and we'll find it here, Focus Area. So it is specific to Photoshop CC 2014. And as the name suggests, it selects areas of focus. Okay, I like to think of this as maybe a version 1 of this tool. I think it might get better. It's not amazing at the moment. It's another tool for your arsenal of selection tools. What it does is it selects things that are in focus, it selects things that are out of focus and leaves you the stuff that's in focus. That's kind of the idea behind it. It's not immediately obvious what's going on, and there are a few things you can change, but most of them I found not to be particularly useful. For example, there's a focus range slider that it really doesn't seem to matter where I put it. It doesn't seem to make any difference at all. It's almost like it's not actually connected to anything at the other end. I found that auto works just fine, so I leave auto on. Then there is a little brush thing here, and logic says if you paint over something, you think that that would add to the selection. It doesn't. You've actually got to click on the minus button and paint over it for it to take away from the area, and that took me a little bit of time to get my head around. Once you kind of get used to the little quirks of this, it's actually a reasonably good tool to use just for selecting areas that are out of focus and replacing them using some sort of composite method. So I'm just going to quickly add a few areas in like this. Okay, and you can see I'm just clicking and they kind of disappear from the selection, and the more time I put into this, as always, the better the end result. Okay, so once I've done that, we could come straight out of here using a selection or a mask. But what they've done, and I think that's a nice touch, is they've added in Refine Edge. So you can further enhance your selection by going to Refine Edge. And if you want to go back and look at the image file archives, we've used Refine Edge a couple of times. We did a whole webinar on it some time back, so there is plenty of information on this on the image file resources. It allows me just to finesse my selection, just to add in a little bit more detail and a little bit better selection, by example turning on edge detection. I normally turn on smart radius as well, and that just helps me just to feather things and bring my edge selection in. I always turn on decontaminate colors. I find that most useful, and click OK. And that just allows me to build up a very nice mask that masks away the areas that were out of focus and allows me to replace them with something else. So we've got another picture here. Let's just open this up. We'll go to Select and All, Edit and Copy, close that down, Edit and Paste, and we'll stick it on the layer below. And we can just move this around. So you can see how that works really nicely. I can come and put in another shot to get an extreme depth of field, which would have been very difficult to do in the real world. Or maybe it's just I wanted to add in a new background that was more interesting or in keeping. So perhaps we'll just go and put a bit of, use one of the new blur filters in here just to add a little bit of lens blur in there. And that kind of works okay, doesn't it? That's pretty good, actually. We'll blur that up. Wait patiently for it to blur. There we go. And if I go in nice and close, you can see it's done a pretty good job at selecting it. All those little fine bits of wood are still there. The sharp bits have come through. So that's what focus area is about. It's selecting the areas that are out of focus. A little bit of lateral thinking from Adobe there, but it's a tool to add to your arsenal. Just have a little play with it and see what you can come up with. Okay, so there we go. That brings us round to the top of the hour, 10 o'clock. We had 4 great questions and photos there. I'd like to thank everybody that's contributed to this talk and made it possible. I'd really like to thank the Theimagefile for letting me do it in the first place, and hopefully I'll get to do some more again soon. But if there are any questions...
There certainly are. Again, Gavin, thank you very, very much. Great webinar yet again. And yes, we do hope that there will be more. We've certainly got lots of things coming up that are planned. So we haven't completely crystallized everything yet, but we've got lots of plans for things for next year. So please keep an eye on the blog and everything. A couple of questions, Gavin.
Far away.
Clarity, 4 minutes. That's not bad. It's not a record, but it's not bad.
I thought I'd get that one in early.
The stars don't rotate, the Earth rotates is what came through when you mentioned about the blur of the stars.
No, I'm sure I'm right on that one. And the Earth is flat. We all know that.
Steve Cook, thanks for your comment, Steve. Dorset Coast is fantastic for stars photography. Have a look at Stephen Banks's work. So it's not always, you don't have to travel a long way to do these amazing pictures of stars. Apparently Stephen Banks on the South Coast. I also follow someone whose name, I didn't want to open up a browser during the webinar because it brings the bandwidth down, but I follow someone on Tumblr called Elenia, but I can't remember her surname, who does amazing pictures of stars. I'm fairly sure she's US based, but I will put it on the recordings page if anyone's interested. I think she does some stunning work, not just stars, but work in general. Steve, thank you very much for that. People were very, very amazed by the top tip of being able to rotate the brush. But can you just once again, just for ease, just show us where you found it?
I certainly can. Okay, so go to the clone stamp tool. Options bar along the top, you're looking for this little button right here. Okay, so it looks like a folder with another clone stamp tool inside. Click on that, and that'll open up your clone source, and the button we're looking for is this one right here. Hopefully you can see that. That is the flip horizontally button, if I can hover my mouse over it. There we go, flip horizontally.
Yeah.
If you turn that on, then your clone stamp tool will work backwards, which is it's a bit of an interesting experience, but it can be very, very useful and a bit of a time save.
Absolutely.
Okay,
and when did that come in, Gavin?
Oh, blimey, Photoshop 4.
Oh, okay. It's been there for
forever. But it's one of those sort of little hidden features that when you know it's useful, and yeah.
Absolutely. Alan on the London Bridge image, let me just get this. Under the histogram in the camera raw module where you have the camera shooting info, can you make it so that the lens millimeter always shows in 35mm equivalents?
As far as I know, no. You know, that's the EXIF information is written by your camera. So whether there is a firmware hack on your camera that allows you to do that, I don't know. There are bits of software that will allow you to change the EXIF information if you really, really want to. But I don't think there's anything in Photoshop that will allow you to convert it to a different format.
Okay, on the same image,
I can understand that.
before you close that image, on the same image, hi Trevor, and I think this is going to be a polarizing filter, but how would Gavin recommend to reduce the reflection in the black egg? I've taken car images where I'd like to just the paintwork and not the reflections. An idea for a workflow would be nice to hear.
Yeah, James is going to be doing the next webinar on polarizing filters.
It's an old job of mine, filtration. But yes, go on, Gavin. Let me hear it.
No, I should hand this over to you. Yeah, so a polarizing filter, to try and remove it in post-production might be possible with a couple of pictures that you could then merge together, but it would be a lot easier to have a polarizing filter on your camera at the taking stage, rotate it around until the reflections are minimized. Polarizing does depend on a number of factors, lighting direction and filtration, so it may not be as simple as I've just suggested, but my way of fixing it, if that was the problem, would be to use a polarizing filter.
Excellent. I also had a couple of queries, one on the same person, a couple of queries on how to prevent getting dust or how to clean dust without having to send the camera away, and there isn't really a way. I know that a lot of the newer cameras or the more advanced technology has these shake things where it will shake the dust away before you actually shoot. Some people say that you should never take the lens off, and I have actually tried that, never removing a lens off a body, and it still gets dust in there, which is slightly alarming. I think it's just, that's technology, and every now and again you've just got to get that camera cleaned professionally.
These aren't necessarily dust, it's often moisture as well, so just the atmospherics will affect it, so you get a little bits of moisture that just leave little sort of moisture spots on the sensor. So yeah, I use sensor swabs, and I use an Arctic Monkey static brush, and I clean my sensor very regularly, but it still gets covered. Just one of those things. If you never want to see dust spots, the easiest thing to do is to shoot always with a 200mm or longer lens at f2.8. You'll never see dust spots that way.
Or leave the camera in the box. that always solves it as well. And one quick one, just to end, and I'm not sure whether you're going to have time for this, Gavin, but a quick way to do watermark on a batch of, say, 100 images in Lightroom, if there is time, please. I thought that there was a watermark tool in Lightroom.
Yes, there is. So if you go to the export option in Lightroom, keep scrolling down on the export option, you'll find a watermarking option where you can either put in a text watermark or an image watermark. I think we might have even done a webinar about that at some point.
I think we did.
So yes, there is a way. Just have a look at the export options in Lightroom.
Perfect. All right, BJ, you've got the information there. Gavin, from everyone, and there is lots of messages coming through, so from everyone, thank you ever so much for this series. It's been fantastic. I'm sure that everyone's found it very useful. Hopefully we will see it back in the new year, but that really is down to you guys. We need your images so that we've got things to talk about. So if you've got images that you want Gavin to demonstrate in this similar sort of series, send them through fixaphoto@theimagefile.com, and we will pass them on, we'll collate them all, get them through to Gavin. Gavin, have a great break. Thank you very much for everything, and we'll see you all soon.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.